You have reached it, okay? You have made it. It is Monday again. It's Quarantine Kitchen Happy Hour, and I am going to have a real good time today talking about fermentation. We are going to embrace the bugs, the little guys, okay? I know we're all battling COVID, but there's some good guys out there, and we need to bring them into our lives a little bit more. Okay? So let me get a little sip here, and we'll get started. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for joining me on a Quarantine Kitchen Happy Hour. Cheers to you all. And you are going to learn a lot today. I'm going to cover a lot of ground. If you've never played with fermentation before, this ain't about pickling, okay? Pickling is a totally different thing, okay? I always think, like, in my head, I'm hearing, this ain't your grandma's pickle, okay? This is fermentation, which is engaging the biosphere, the little germs and bacteria and yeast that surround us, okay? And we harness these little creatures, and they provide excellent end products for us, okay? We see it in a ton of our stuff, okay? So think about where we see fermentation in food, okay? First of all, we see fermentation when we're first learning about like sanitation and things like that in the kitchen. We don't want the bad bugs to grow. So we learn all about that, but at the same time, we're also learning about all of the rest of the biosphere, because much of the biosphere behaves in much the same way as those bad bugs do that we learn about when we're first teaching chefs, okay? So we think about the bugs that we use in the kitchen. Think about dairy, okay? Things like cheese and things like yogurt, of course, are cultured, right? And so that's using bacteria, and those bacteria are creating an acidic environment which coagulates. It denatures the proteins in there and coagulates the proteins, so it firms up and turns into curd, and then we can kind of press that and make our cheese out of that, right? So first of all, it all starts with fermentation, right? Let's see, other types of fermentation would be things like alcohol. Gosh, that's an obvious one. We're actually going to make a little country wine today, okay? I got a ton of fruit. It's super ripe, and I'm just like, man, I'm going to make a little bit of wine. Besides, we're spending way too much money on wine these days. And so I'm going to make a little bit of peach wine today. And so when we're looking at the fermentation of wine, we're not really getting that acidic environment that we get with cheese making from bacteria. We're using yeast, and this yeast actually produces alcohol. And so that is where we get that, okay? And we're going to kind of play with that. As we get into this, we're going to talk a little bit more about all of these things at every stage, okay? Another area we use fermentation is our bread, okay? We use yeast, and we use sourdough, and sourdough is just wild yeast, okay? I've got my sourdough here, and I'm just gonna go ahead and mix my sourdough up for tomorrow, because I just pulled it out of the fridge. I gotta start baking again tomorrow. My sourdough is pretty forgiving, so I'm just gonna give him a little feeding right now. It takes 2 seconds, and I'm just gonna leave him out on the counter. By tomorrow, this guy's gonna be ready to go into a loaf of bread. So this is fermentation, okay? This is wild yeast. My particular sourdough, it's a cemetery yeast. I live next to the cemetery, and I took my sourdough starter in the very beginning out on a walk with me in the cemetery. And so I collected a few of the yeasts out there, and I'm just living right here. And so that's what my starter was. It's just water and it's flour, okay? Now, very important, when you're using water, you don't want water out of the tap, okay? I've got a little filter pitcher here, but the main thing is I put the water in here several hours ago and left the top off. And so all of the chlorine is melted away, okay? Melted. All of the chlorine is evaporated away. I think that's a better way to put that, right? We're talking about fermentation, and I'm just throwing my sourdough starter together because I need to bake in the morning, okay? I just added a little water. You're gonna see as I work through the day, I'm not one of these science guys that's measuring every little gram and pulling out special meters to measure, you know, the acidity or sweetness of things or anything. I'm just doing this with my tongue today. I'm just throwing ingredients together. You're not gonna see me measure very much. I just threw in some water that I let sit out to let the chlorine evaporate off so it doesn't kill my natural yeast. And now I'm just adding a little bit of flour, several spoonfuls. And my recipe I usually use, I need about 9 ounces of starter in the morning, okay? And I'm just gonna stir that on in. And if it looks right, it looks right. If it's too heavy, I'll add a little water. If it's too light, I'll add a little more flour, okay? But I'm looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that, and I'm just gonna let that grow overnight, okay? Let me get rid of this. And we'll move on with fermentation, but there's another example. Yeast in sourdough and yeast in commercial yeast that we use in baking. It's all the biosphere. That's what we're talking about today. It's fermentation. So, other areas of fermentation. Today you're going to see vegetables, okay? We're going to be pickling a bunch of vegetables. And again, I use that word pickling. We're really fermenting a bunch of different vegetables. So today I'm going to be making a kraut. That's typically like one of the first fermentation methods you see, okay? It's an example of a dry brining method, okay? We're really just salting, or dry salting method. Just putting my little flour away here. So this dry salting method, we're going to have a little bit of cabbage or something. We just kind of dry salt it, and we put it in a crock, and we kind of pound it a little bit, and that's basically it, okay? So I'm going to do 2 examples of kind of a dry salt brining today, if you want to call it that, or a dry salting. Mr. Bob's out there. Thanks for joining. He's a kefir man. That's awesome. Making kimchi. Hey, you sound like you might know a lot more about this than I do. Okay, I'm just a very, very simple guy. Okay, so let me set my sourdough starter aside for tomorrow. My kitchen's packed today, and yeah, we're still talking about different types of ferments, right? So we're talking about vegetables. Today, I am making a kraut. I am making a hot sauce. Those are both going to be just like dry salting methods. And then I'm also making a brine method where I put a bunch of spices together with a ton of salt and some water. And I go ahead and just pour that over some raw vegetables. And then we let that ferment, okay? I'm making a kimchi today, okay? I'm making, I'm just a white boy, making some kimchi, okay? But, this is something that is a kitchen staple, and it is just so delicious, and it is so good for you. And it's a really great project for using up a bunch of different vegetables. So that's kind of why I'm doing the kimchi method. With that method, it's not so much a brine, but we're going to create a paste that goes on the vegetables. Another thing about kimchi type fermentations is we pre-salt our vegetables. Let me kind of show you what that looks like, okay? I've got a bunch of kimchi vegetables. Why, they're just right here, okay? I got a little bowl with them. And here's what I'm going to be fermenting today, among other things, right? So I've got some winter squash here, some butternut squash. I've got some radishes here, and I've got some okra today. And I have like three different densities. And what I did this morning was I salted them all, and I let them kind of seep a little bit of water out. This is called wilting. We see this in a lot of different preparations. And I'm just going to kind of continue this process. I got a ton of liquid here. So we put salt on these vegetables, toss them in salt, and then just let them sit. And you can see how much liquid has collected here. There's just loads of it, tons of it. So I'm going to pour this liquid off, and I'm going to lay on another batch of salt to wilt these vegetables further. Again, this is really common in kimchi style fermentations where we'll do this pre-salting. So that's what you're seeing right now. I'm just tossing a little bit of salt, I'm just eyeballing stuff. That's all you're going to see today. I'm not going to be measuring a ton of stuff. So there it is. Just toss a little salt on there, recoating them again, and I'm just going to lay it out and allow that to lose a little bit more moisture or wilt. I'm going to grab some radishes now, and we're going to do the same thing. Bump it down so you can see. And I'm going to move this crock before I break it. Now this is drawing moisture out. Salt moves in, water moves out. I'm just going to move a crock here. It's making me nervous. As I said, my kitchen's pretty jammed up. I'm going to add a little more salt to these radishes. And I've got some okra pods here. They're beautiful okra pods. I'll talk while I toss. Beautiful okra pods. I got them at Route 64 in Sacramento, and they just have these green and red pods, and I could not pass them up. I love pickled okra, and this is going to be just like pickled okra. It's going to create its own acidity and eat just like an okra pickle, okay? It's going to be beautiful. So these veggies have all been retossed. They're going to kick out a little bit more moisture, and we're going to come back to this kimchi later, okay? But this is kind of what I've been kind of staring at all day long. It's just been kind of sitting here wilting for me. So different types of veggie ferments. You're going to see a bunch of them today. Let's see. Finally, I mentioned I'm going to be making a country wine. Let's see, there are other types of ferments too. Things like seasonings that we see around the world. We don't really think about it, but there are a lot of classic seasoning preparations like soy sauce, for instance, which is a fermented product, okay? In Southeast Asian cooking, you see a lot of that fish sauce. Here, where's my squid sauce, okay? Here it is right here. I got some squid sauce, okay? This fish sauce is used quite a lot in, like I said, Southeast Asia, places like that. This is another fermented product. It's fish and salt, and they allow it to ferment. And it creates a unique flavor that is missing in a dish if you don't have it, right? Let's see. In the old days in Rome, they had a fermented fish preparation with salt that was called garum, and that was used throughout the Middle Ages, different versions of that. Again, they're just like seasoning preparations that are like made out of fermented fish. It's kind of amazing. Just about every culture on the planet has had some form of fermentation. Even you know, thinking of native Inuits, okay, up in the frozen north, they're digging down into the permafrost and burying fish down there and allowing it to ferment. You know, it's pretty wild stuff. Not what you would expect to see, but back in the old days, they had to get really, really creative with preservation, and that's what this is all about. Preservation. We didn't have refrigeration back in the old days, so the folks of the olden times had to figure things out, and they figured out that by adding salt, they could stave off bacteria that would cause things like spoilage or illness, okay? And so they would use salt quite a bit, and the salt would just naturally lend certain characteristics to the food. It wasn't just salty food. After a while of sitting, the food began to get acidic, okay? What's happening? They didn't know it then, but little bacteria, lactobacilli, I'm not gonna get too technical here, but these bacteria got in there and they start eating the carbs in there, and they start manufacturing a waste product. And the waste product, okay, we're talking pee basically, we're talking bacterial pee here, but it's acid. This is where we get vinegar. Vinegar is grape juice, wine that has gone bad. It gets these acid-causing bacteria, these acid-creating bacteria in there. They eat up the carbs and they create acid, okay? And that's where we get vinegar for making pickles and things like that. That's where we get pickles, right? The traditional pickle is made just by salt brining, salt brine on pickles. It's not a vinegar brine. That's what you're going to see today, okay? All of this is fermentation, harnessing bacteria to create acidity, okay? You'll also see some yeast today. You just saw some in my bread, and you are going to see some yeast in my country wine. We're going to be talking about yeast. When we are talking about yeast, yeast is different from bacteria. Bacteria is a creature. It's a little animal, single-celled animal, right? But yeast is a plant, a single-celled plant or fungus, right? And so the waste product of yeast is different from bacteria. The waste product of yeast is alcohol. And we also get CO2 out of yeast as well. And that's where we get the rise out of our bread. That's where we get the bubbles in our beer and our sparkling wine and all of that stuff, right? It's all about the bacteria. These guys are totally our friends, right? Let me take a sip and we'll talk a little bit more about bacteria before we get cooking here. I gotta say, lubricated, Sacramento's finest. So now about these bacteria, they are all around us. They aren't just in the food. They're on us, they're on our skin, they're in our mouths, they're down our throats. They don't survive too well in our stomachs, but you get to the other side of the stomach, you know, the poopy parts and everything. Billions upon billions, okay, of bacteria in there. And those are healthy bacteria. Those gut bacteria help us digest our food. And we often eat foods in order to promote more of this gut bacteria. Now, a bacteria is not going to survive the trip through your stomach, but the building blocks of those bacteria do, and they form down there, okay? So we eat things like yogurt. That acidophilus bacteria in there is considered good for your gut bacteria, right? And it helps promote those gut bacteria. All of that bacteria helps us digest. It helps us be healthier, get more out of our food. And if we don't have those gut bacteria, we're less healthy. And every time we take an antibiotic, and you know the doctor wants us to, and it's a good idea to do what your doctor says, right? But every time we do that, we destroy much of that gut biome and all of the biome really in our entire digestive tract. And so we need to kind of maybe eat some more of these fermented foods to kind of bring that back, bring back that gut health after eating things like, after taking things like an antibiotic or something like that. Please take your medicine if the doctor prescribes. Let me see who's here, okay? I got Kim is out there, John, Jade. I just want to see if I got any questions or anything. Derek, thanks for joining us. Good to see some chefs out there looking good. Monthly kimchi making has been constant during this pandemic. Sounding good, Diane. Awesome. I remember you. Nice. Hey, you're probably going to think I'm a piker at this, okay? I just do kind of, restaurant style kimchi, okay? Let's see, Roberta Walker, nice shirt. Hey, thanks for mentioning my shirt, okay? I got a free shirt this week at V.MillerMeats, and I wanted to bring this up because he's going to be on next week. We're going to do a little tour of his shop, and he might even, I don't know, twirl his fingers or show us a thing or two in his shop. It's going to be fabulous. So yeah, thanks for reminding me. I'm wearing his new shirt. I'll show you the back, okay? It's total, Sons of Hamarchy, get it? Huh? It's a joke. It's crazy. And Miss Caitlin's out there. Thanks for joining, Miss Caitlin. I think I got a veggie class for you today. Let's see. And back to Bob. Yeah, it looks like a great show today. I got a lot of people out there. Again, thanks for joining me, folks. This is really, really good stuff. And I hope you're learning a little bit as we go. I'm basically laying down culinary school. I look back occasionally and it just blows my mind how much stuff I have covered. And look at what we're covering today. Okay, we're making wine, for God's sakes. Okay, it's going to be awesome. Okay, so again, thanks for coming along for me for the ride. Okay, let me get another sip here. I think I'm done talking about how great bacteria and yeast are, okay? Let's go ahead and make our first thing, okay? Now, I kind of teach in reverse. A lot of people start out with those dry salting methods, but I have a few things I want to get on the fire, okay? And that's how I always start my classes. So I'm going to start out by making our brine style pickle first. And again, this brine is just a salt brine, no vinegar. We want bacteria to create vinegar in the process of fermentation, okay? Really cool stuff. So Miss Roberta is asking a question about how many days should does it take to ferment these vegetables? And that is a super good question. I haven't gotten there yet. That we are going to see as the week progresses. Now, the amount of salt I've been using is kind of higher than you might use in winter time. There are a lot of variables here. So if I use a little less salt, these vegetables will ferment really, really quickly in the summer. In the summertime, I want to use a little more salt to keep that like spoilage at bay while I get that fermentation going. Okay, so there's a variable. Another variable, well, we just kind of mentioned it, was heat, right? So amount of salt, how much heat they're exposed to. Another variable is how big the vegetables are cut, how dense the vegetables are. I'm going to be doing a kimchi in a minute here, and I actually just built those dill pickles, and I put the firmer vegetables on the bottom, the softer veggies on the top. In about 4 days, maybe 5 days, I bet you the cucumbers will be ready to eat out of that, and probably in about 7 or 8, I bet you it'll be more like carrots down in the bottom of that. My kimchi is going to progress just the same. I'm going to have okra in the kimchi. The okra is probably going to ferment in about 3 days. I got winter squash in the bottom of that thing. It might take 7 or 8 days for that, okay? And also with the kimchi, I'm just going to eat the quick stuff on top, maybe that okra, and I might throw it in my refrigerator and let it ferment slowly for a good long time, maybe, a couple of weeks or something, maybe even a month, okay? So good question, but yeah, it's this ferment class isn't going to give you a lot of rock solid answers on anything. It's all about having fun, using stuff up that you have around, and experimenting, okay? And just having a bunch of bubbling crocks around the house. That's what it's about. And you just kind of, you see what you can see, okay? Let me talk about a gentleman, okay? I didn't get a sip here. Let me get a sip. Let's take a little quick break, okay? Sandor Katz wrote the masterwork on fermentation. This is one of his books. He's got another one called Wild Fermentation as well, considered maybe his masterwork, okay? But this has got it all. You go through this thing and it's like this class. I swear I don't think there's really recipes in this thing. He's just talking about it, and the whole thing is just like, hey, a little veggie, a little salt, just what I was saying a minute ago. It's really all it is. And experimentation, right? I guarantee, hey, maybe one of these or two of these ferments might not even work out, but I think they'll be fine. Usually we do fine with this stuff, but Hey, believe me, I've had some doozies out there that I was just saying, yeah, this didn't really work out. Golden beets didn't work well for me. The color of it was just utterly horrible. So that's maybe something I need to play with, right? But that's what this is all about, is just getting in there, playing with this stuff, making some discoveries on your own. Usually the things that we're playing with that we're fermenting are extra produce, things that we have an abundance of, right? That's the idea. Cabbages, root vegetables, you know, how much can you do with fresh turnips, right? Let's just pickle them. You can make a kimchi out of some turnips or something. One of my favorite kimchis was a turnip kimchi, as a matter of fact. So there it is, okay? Sandor Kat's Art of Fermentation. It's just like so basic. He's just a real dude laying it down in a very, very real way, and makes it very, very understandable. Okay. Basically, I'm not measuring, but what you're going to see is about a ½ ounce per pint of salt, okay? Or a ½ ounce per pound of water, okay? That's what I kind of mean. So I just get my pot, and I don't normally like to set a pot on a cutting board. It's a pet peeve. I'll set it right here and build this right in front of you, okay? So basically when I'm doing a brine, I'm just throwing everything in the beginning. So I'm going to do about a quart of brine here. So I need about an ounce of salt in here. And so I'm not measuring it. I'm just throwing in about an ounce of salt for this, okay? I'm doing 2 pints, and this is going to be about a quart of water. So give me about an ounce of salt. I'm going to throw in a few peppercorns, and I got a blend of peppercorns here. There's some green and some black ones in there, maybe even a pink one. I'm going to throw in some dill seed, and this dill seed, I like to just bruise a little bit. So I have a mortar and pestle, and I'm doing about a tablespoon or so for this 1 quart of brine. And again, I'm not going to really grind these, but I just want to bruise them a little bit. So those were dill seeds. Now another thing I've got, dill seed, mustard seeds. I'm going to do about a teaspoon of mustard seeds. Add a little pungency. And now I've got some parsley stems here. I had some parsley in the house, and a parsley stem is going to be excellent in a dill pickle brine. And so I'm going to throw that in. And you know what other kind of stems are going to be good in a dill pickle brine? I'm thinking some dill stems. And I got some dill at Route 64. You're going to hear a lot of Route 64 today, okay? I got a ton of produce at Route 64, and that's what you're going to see me working on today. So big old fat dill stems in there for flavor, okay? I'm going to throw down some celery in there, because I like the flavor of celery. And I'm throwing in a few of those little arbol chilies, just because I had them around the house. This is a lot of ingredients. I'll have it again, like I said, on the internet for you. Now, I'm going to crush some garlic cloves. Throwing a brine together is pretty quick. And there we go. And then I want to throw in some turmeric. I'm going to call these yellow pickles. And so I am going to use some turmeric in here. And what I'm going to do is just shave it up with my knife and throw it on in. Really, really fine. We're just going to steep that turmeric in there. And it's going to be beautiful. Get a little flavor out of it. By the way, Johnny from our industry group, she was talking to me the other day, and she mentioned turmeric dill pickles. And I thought, you know what? Or maybe turmeric dill kraut, I think you said. And I wound up doing the pickles. That sounded good to me. When I saw some turmeric. All right, so a bunch of turmeric in there. I threw in like 2 roots. And again, you're not seeing me measure. A big part of this fermentation is using what you have. This is perfect for your quarantine kitchen, I should say, right? Any produce that you have, you go to the farmer's market and you see a big old bunch of radishes or something like that. Hey, ferment them in a crock. You got a crock at home, just put them up. A little bit of salt and you're in business, right? I am just throwing in the kitchen sink into this pot right now, okay? So I've got it all down. Let's see. I had a little bit of salt. I put in an ounce of salt for a quart of water. Dill seed, celery, turmeric, dill, mustard seed, And that's about it, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and put about a quart of water. Now, earlier I was talking about if you have chlorinated water, it's gonna damage the bacteria in your ferment, right? I don't want to use water out of the tap if I'm just pouring it on my raw vegetables. But I can take water out of the tap if I'm going to cook it, okay? As I cook this, the chlorine's going to evaporate off and it'll all be gone by the time this heats up and reaches a boil. And then I can pour it over my vegetables and the chlorine won't kill my bacteria, okay? And so I'm going to put in about a quart of water and I'm going to just start bringing this up. Always use cold water, never hot. And I really just wanted to get that on the fire. Once that's on the fire, I can start kind of putting the actual pickle together, okay? So I can kind of show you what I have here. Let me bring this on over, and I'll get rid of a few things. Again, I was at Route 64, and they had a bunch of great cucumbers, just a mix though, right? And I figured, hey, I could do some like thick sliced pickles in here and just have them fermented. I'm gonna ferment them along with these tiny little red onions he had, right? And I'm just gonna toss them in with the brine too, and they're gonna ferment up too. Pickled onions, okay? A little bit of celery, that'll be a nice pickle as well. And I'm gonna cut up this carrot as well, and we're gonna pack it all in a crock with a bunch of dill, okay? And that's gonna be the plan. So that's what you're gonna see right now. I am going to kind of layer these because some of the vegetables are going to be softer than others. So I'm going to put I'm going to put the cucumbers on top, and pretty much everything else can handle just being below, okay? And so let me get a crock for this thing. We got the brine going in the back there, and we're just going to build our crock. Now, this is a tall, straight-sided crock. When you're doing fermentation, you can use anything really, okay? You're gonna see a bunch of different crocks. I'll go show you my, I got a kimchi pot too and everything, but really anything will work. A jar, heck, you can use plastic, you can use stainless steel. It doesn't have to be crockery, but crockery kind of maintains a nice little cooling effect, right? And so you'll see a lot of that used. Straight sides are nice because what you wanna do is press your vegetables, okay? And so you'll want not a lid, but a press that fits down inside and can keep the vegetables submerged underneath, okay? And so I've got this perfect disc that fits right into this crock, and I'll show you a few hacks for this as well, okay? But this is what you're gonna see me build right now. And I'm gonna go ahead and start prepping my cucumbers, okay? I worked for about 8 years with a Japanese chef, and he always talked about how the ends of the cucumbers are bitter. I'm gonna kind of just get rid of the end bits a little bit. That's about all you're gonna see me waste. And the rest of this, I'm just gonna cut on down. I think I'm gonna change knives here, actually. This knife has a little serration, and it'll be kind of nice to get through these. And here we go, I'm doing 2 at a time, and they're just flying around. I'm cutting them pretty thick because the fermentation process is going to make them much softer. So if you cut them paper thin, they're just gonna turn into mush. I'll do these 1 at a time. I can get a more accurate cut and go a little faster, okay? So this is a knife skills class. We just want to make some pickles, okay? And I'm working more towards the tip of my knife so the cukes don't stick to me. And by the way, those are just yellow cucumbers. They are not lemon cucumbers. Now I got some greens, pickling cubes. Boom. And 1 more, and we're done. So easy. I'm gonna have a ton of food prepped by the end of this class. Whoa, man down. They're beautiful. They are just beautiful, okay? Almost everything is cut up except for this carrot. And I have already really scrubbed the carrot. Now, one thing about this equipment, I've washed it with soap and water, but I didn't sterilize it. The carrot, I scrubbed it, you know, with a metal scrubby, but I didn't peel it or anything, okay? We kind of want some natural yeast from the environment. I'm not gonna seal these jars when we're done. I'm gonna put a cheesecloth over the top. So so yeast and natural bacteria can get in from the environment. Okay, so again, this is not a sterile process. We want to get a little dirty with this one, if you will. Okay, not too dirty, but you guys see what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut up some carrot for it, and we're going to just start layering some veggies in here. I hope they'll all fit. Maybe I don't need all this carrot. Just a few carrot pickles. And carrots, they're going to stand up, right? They're not going to get mushy or anything. So I'm going to pack them in the bottom. And I'll throw in a sprig or two of dill. And I'm going to pack in some celery. Those will hold up really nicely. I accidentally grabbed a red onion, okay? So celery is going to hold up nicely. So I'll throw those in. And I'll throw in a dill, maybe one, okay? And there it is so far. You guys get the idea, okay? Nothing fancy here. And then I'm going to throw in my onions. I could have put some more carrot in. I think I will. I'll layer in a little more carrot, but let me throw in some dill. I think I'll throw a little more in. More carrot. Why not? I didn't throw carrot in my kimchi, so I'll throw it in here. Those are going to be carrot pickles. I just checked my brine. It's doing fine. Not quite up to the boil yet. We're still cruising along. I got John out there. I got Kim out there. Oh boy, I got a lot of people out there. Johnny, is that a rum top jar? I don't think it is I don't think it's a type of a jar. I'm not sure who that is. So we'll talk about that, Johnny. Good question. These are some jars that we've had around the house for a while. They were given to us as an early wedding gift, okay? Finally, I'm gonna layer in my pickles on top. These cucumbers are gonna ferment faster than the rest of the vegetables. And so, hey, I might start eating some of these pickles along the way, right? I eat the cucumbers off the top while the others are still fermenting, is what I mean. Those firmer vegetables. So now I've got dill packed in there, and it's looking like my crock is coming all the way to the top, but I'm not too worried about this because part of this all is to kind of smash things down. And I'm going to add some hot liquid to this, and that is going to help extract the liquid out of these cucumbers as well. Now, we probably won't be covering this all the way tonight. In the morning, if there's not enough liquid, I'll add a little more brine. I'll be doing a little live broadcast every morning, checking on my pickles. I got to figure out what time I want to do it. I'm not sure if I can do it at the same time every day. It might just be an emergency special broadcast or something. Pickle alert. I like the sound of that. I just came up with that in this moment, okay? Tell me what you think about pickle alert, guys. I think this town needs a pickle alert. Personally, my brine is coming up, guys. There's not a heck of a lot of cooking, so I switched up how I'm doing my kitchen today. So there it is. It's like super close. It's almost boiling here. I'm going to get it all the way to the boil, and I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to let it steep like a cup of tea. Okay. I got my crock loaded up with veggies here. My brine is almost up. I'm going to let that brine cool slightly. I don't want to pour it on boiling hot. And I also want those flavors to kind of marry a little bit. I want to extract flavors out of all that goodness that I put into the pot. So that's going to be sitting on the stove. I'm not going to pour any brine into this until a little bit later on, okay? So if you'll excuse me, I'll put this crock elsewhere and I'll clean up. I just hit the boil over here. My liquid is turning yellow from the turmeric, okay, if you can kind of see that. So I want to get, you can barely see. I want to get a little more of that. Whoa, that's a little too yellow. Now you can kind of see a little better. Let's try that light right there. I'm going to turn my flame off. I'm going to cover that pot. And I'm going to let this one steep for a little bit. So it's right over there. Just keep an eye on that. If anything happens, you guys will tell me, okay? Okay, so here's my crock with all of the dill and the cucumbers and all of that good stuff, okay? I might throw a few little additional little things in here to just tell people that it is pickled. So I'm going to throw in some extra dill seeds. And I'm going to throw in some mustard seeds. And those will just be floating around in the mix. The rest of this stuff that I've been cooking, I'm going to strain out. It's yucky, okay? It's funky. I might throw a few little things in here, but I don't know. So I've got a little strainer. It's going to go over the top of my crock top crock. And I have been steeping this brine all of this time, okay? So here it is. It looks a little bit yellowish, if you guys can see that, okay? I'm going to go ahead and pour that over my stuff. Let me adjust that camera. That's better. That's better. And so you can see a yellowish looking brine here. Now, if this doesn't come all the way up to the top, don't worry, because the cucumbers are going to kick out a ton of water. They're coming in contact with hot, salty water right now. The turmeric gets really soft, and I think I can go ahead and pour it in. So I did about a quart of water, about, and there's all that stuff sitting there. All right, so I think we are just sitting pretty, okay? As I look at this, I can see that the liquid is just about a ½ inch below. There is the liquid right there. So what we're gonna do, you guys can see that. Oh, sorry. See when I press on it? That's what I'm talking about, okay? So now, let me get a cover. So we are gonna need to press that down. This is the perfect amount of liquid, guys. Look at that. Right on. Sometimes I get lucky, right? Okay, looking good. I'm going to get this guy out of the way. My kraut, I'm going to work in a little bit of caraway seed to this, and I want to work in a little bit of horseradish. I want to kind of blend up my salt with those flavors. So I got a nice little dish here, and I got a bowl of salt here that I'm going to use. And again, I'm not really looking at, amounts here. Basic idea, maybe about a ½ ounce of salt, maybe a tablespoon per pound of cabbage or veggies when you're doing this. And I should say, you don't have to make kraut out of cabbage, right? It can be made out of anything. Just shred up anything and salt it, and you'll have a kraut, my friend, okay? So that's basically the deal, okay? So what I want to do is I am going to bruise up some caraway seeds to blend into my salt. I want to season up this salt here. And I'm also going to flavor it with a little bit of horseradish. I got some fresh horseradish root. I thought I would play with it. So caraway seed, these taste like the little seeds on rye bread, if you've ever had, okay? And I like a little bit of caraway in mine. This is very like Scandinavian. They put like dill and caraway and everything up there. And I'm just gonna, again, bruise these caraway seeds. I don't wanna grind this into dust. I just wanna kind of crackle. Crackety crack, don't talk back. Okay, so caraway seeds are kind of mashed up. I'm gonna blend them into my little salt container here, and that looks like that. I probably got about a teaspoon and a half of those caraway seeds, and like I said, I got about an ounce of salt in there. I'm gonna have about a pound or so of cabbage. Okay? So I've got my horseradish, and I'm gonna go ahead and peel this. And it's kind of nice, back in the day, they used to sell the whole horseradish root. Now they're kind of cutting them down. Not many people need a whole horseradish root. Plus, you got to explain it to the kids. Okay, almost there. So just getting the outer peel off of this, I can smell horseradish. And by the way, horseradish, classic with sauerkraut, eating like sausage platters and stuff like that. You better believe a big old dab of horseradish next to that. Mustard, things like that, classic, okay? So I'm getting the horseradish right in the slaw. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using a tool. I don't know how many people have seen these, but this is just a little 49-cent ginger grater that I got at the Asian store. And this is my favorite tool for things like ginger and horseradish. And sometimes you'll see little ceramic versions of this, but this metal one just cuts through this stuff like butter. And you just kind of run it over these little serrations on there, I guess you could call them. And this is a pretty dry root. I'm not getting much out of this. And it just grates it up. There it goes. It starts collecting in a little cup down here. It's a dry root, ladies and gentlemen. This is a ginger grater. And I'm mixing that in with my salt so it can blend throughout. Oh boy, my kitchen's a little warm and I can really smell this horseradish. I wanted to show you this little one, but I might break out a microplane too. Microplane as well. Let me see if that's any better on this piece. I've got one right here. Yeah, maybe a little better. So that's going to go on the bottom. All of this grated horseradish, I'm going to blend into my salt so I can just mix it in evenly throughout. And you're about to see the Kraut method. It's almost there. The seeds, I put in caraway seeds and horseradish here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and blend up my salt mixture here with all of my horseradish and everything. And then what I do, the old-fashioned Kraut method is, I get a crock. I have one very, very similar to the last one you saw. And I just threw a couple pieces of horseradish in there. And then I have a muddler here. It's a bar implement, okay? And what I'm going to do is pound my cabbage as I add salt to it. This is going to kind of break open cell walls, kind of let salt go in and let more water flow out. And we talked about this, we talked about this earlier when we were talking about sweating those vegetables for kimchi, okay? Salt is the magic man with this thing. It's going to do everything for us, okay? So I should really say what the salt does is it preserves it. It keeps bad bacteria from acting on this food. So I'm just going in with a little bit of cabbage, maybe about a third or so. And I'm going to add about a third of my blend here, horseradish, caraway, and salt. Nothing fancy here. And I'm going to just start pounding. That's kind of it. The salt is going to keep bad bacteria from growing while our friends, the good bacteria, can get a foothold in there. And once they get a foothold, they can start producing more bacteria, okay? I'm probably going to want to cut up more cabbage here. I pre-cut my vegetables this time. I think I will cut more. So I just added a little more cabbage, and I'm going to add about another third of my salty mixture, salty horseradish. And we're going to start pounding again. Whoa, I don't want to pound all the way through the bottom of this thing. But that's it. And I can already see some moisture coming out. It's getting a little shiny in there. All right, I'm going to go with a little more. I think I'll cut some more cabbage. Let's show you how I cut up the cabbage real quick. I just did it with a knife, but I can show you a little something else too. Let me pound this guy up, and we'll add a little more salt maybe. So it seems like a lot of cabbage, but it really kind of pounds down. And it's definitely kind of drawing out a little bit of moisture. Okay, osmosis. Let me get rid of a few things and we'll bring a little more cabbage into it. We're doing fermentation here. I'm working on a slaw. I'm going to cut up a little more cabbage, show you how I broke down those heads. Basically, I cut my head into quarters, keeping the core intact. And then I just cut a little angle cut and get rid of that core. And now I'm just going to go across the top. Now, you could do these kind of long strips, you know, big pieces, but I like to shorten them. It's easier to cut them. There's a little funky brown spot right there I'm going to get rid of. Ding. And I just go across the top and shave this, but I want to point out, I don't want to get it too thin. Look at the pieces here, guys. They're fairly thick. Once this starts fermenting, again, if you make this stuff paper thin, it's just going to turn into mush. You need a little bit of body there to stand up through this fermentation process, okay? And so kind of big pieces, gosh, what are those, a 1/4 inch wide or something, even more, okay? I'm not really getting super thin with this. And by the way, when it's done, you're gonna have a crunchy kraut that's gonna have a really cool bite to it. The kind of kraut you don't see every day. It ain't your grandma's kraut, I'll tell you, okay? Or actually, you know, it kind of is your grandma's kraut. That's what we're talking about. Oh, yeah. Hey, all right, thanks for the shirt, buddy. Got a Mr. Celebrity out there. Okay, I just added in another piece of cabbage. I don't want to make much more because, quite honestly, Mrs. Nelson, she isn't going to be eating any of this sauerkraut. It's all for me. I got to do another little salt blend. I'm not going to worry about the horseradish for this end. It'll all blend, trust me. I'm just going to add a little more salt, about a tablespoon, and a couple of more of those caraway seeds. I'm just going to throw them, let me bruise them a little. You don't get much flavor out of them if you don't bruise them. Okay, there it is. So just a sec, guys. Again, I'm not really measuring much stuff here, okay? This is about just using what you got around, experimenting, having fun. I want to show you a book. It's a great book by a great man. Let me get this in here, and we'll talk about Sandor Katz, the god of fermentation, at least in the kitchens, okay? I'm adding a last little bit of salt here over the top. This is just caraway and salt here. Let me get a little view on there, and let me wipe my hand off. A lot of scene changes today, guys, sorry. But we're doing a ton of stuff. We already started one pickle, it's pretty much done. And now we're finishing, we started a brine style pickle, and now we're finishing a kraut style pickle, okay? I'm getting down in there with my muddler, and it's getting really wet now. I don't know if you guys can tell, but it's pretty shiny looking from all of the moisture coming out of that cabbage. I think that's about as much beating as it can take. So I'm just gonna leave it alone, just like that. And we are gonna let this sit, and tomorrow morning we're gonna check it, okay? The only thing that's missing right now is a weight on the top. So I've got this little weight, and I can even put something heavier on top of this guy, like say this little mortar here. And we keep that weight on there. And eventually, tomorrow morning, I should see water coming out when I tilt this guy. There should be water. If there's not enough water, I'm going to add a little saltwater brine. And again, I'll do about the same amount of salt on that brine that I did earlier. All right, we're talking about fermentation here. We're just doing vegetables and salt so far. The only reason I used liquid in the other one, I could have used salt for that second one, but making that brine allowed me to infuse other flavors into the mix, okay? And you can see the bright yellow of that turmeric in that liquid. Just think of the flavor too. Think of that yellow as flavor, right? You're just like you infuse that color, you're infusing flavors into things as well. Infusing flavors, okay? And so let me do another little sip here. Good times, guys. I'm gonna do another dry rub type of ferment here, and this is just going to be some hot sauce. That's what you're going to see next. This is going to go really, really quick, okay? Basically, I have got some garlic cloves. I am just going to throw them in there, okay? I'm not going to peel them or anything like that. I've got some jalapenos here I'm going to cut through, and I've got one sweet pepper, okay? It's a little sweet Anaheim here. And so I'm going to go through, I'm going to get the seeds out of most of this stuff. I'm going to get about 1/3 of the seeds out, and the rest is just going to go into this crock and get pounded down, okay, with a little bit of salt. And I might not need all of these, we'll see. I'm going to hold off on cutting them all. That's a tip, because you never know how much it's going to kind of push down. You saw how the kraut smashed down as I was kind of using that muddler on it. Okay, and let me pull the seeds out of this yellow pepper. It's kind of a cool looking funky one. And this is going to add a little sweetness to the mix, so it's not all spice. And you can see I'm not getting crazy, you know, I'm not worried about every last little seed or whatever. It's all going to kind of come out in the mix. And everything's going to get cut up. Okay. I'm going to cut into these jalapenos, and I'm not cutting them much, just rough, right? Let me use my other knife for that. And here's where we start making jalapeno jokes about going to the bathroom. Just jalapenos and salt, a little bit of garlic. That's all I'm doing. Ah, that's right. I'm going to throw in a little preserved lemon. Earlier, I was talking about fermented flavoring agents, if you will. And preserved lemon, gosh, that's probably driving you crazy, guys. Back this up so you can see. Preserved lemon is another one of those flavoring ingredients that is a fermentation. It's an example of fermentation. So let me get these out of here. I'm going to just put my chilies in the crock, load them in. I will add a few garlic cloves, right? I'm not going to crush them or anything, just throw them in. By the way, those garlic cloves often turn blue. Don't freak out if the garlic turns a funky greenish blue. The copper in it. It's if you use water in this stuff, there's copper in the water and it turns colored. So yeah, the garlic will react. Turns blue. It looks very funky. All right, let's see. I've got a good amount of peppers in there. I'm going to add some salt. I'm going to throw down about probably about 2 teaspoons to a tablespoon here, because I got about half the vegetable here. And I'm just going to add some salt and start pounding and add a little salt and pound. And then I want to get another ingredient into this as well, but I didn't really want to pound it up. So as I'm pounding these guys, they are stirring around in there. So I'm going to add a little more of this salt. And I think now I can add my lemon. So let's show you a little bit of preserved lemon here. I still have a little more salt to work in. Okay. Now I got a little preserved lemon down on the bottom. Let me show you that. What this was I just cut up some lemons, and usually you want kind of a thinner skinned lemon. These were pretty thick skins. I'm going to cut them down quite a bit, but you just pack them in salt. I threw in a little bit of mustard seed and coriander and some red pepper in here. A little bay leaf, as you can see, is rolling around in there, but that's it. Salt and lemons. In the restaurants, if I had a case of lemons that was starting to go bad or whatever, I'd make a big batch of preserved lemon. And this is something we'll see in like Middle Eastern spice applications or Middle Eastern dishes, things like that. And we're going to use them in this hot sauce. I wanted to just experiment with it. And I also wanted to show you another fermented item. This one is usually fermented under a refrigeration or in a cold cellar over a long period of time, by the way, okay? So that one takes maybe like 10 days or something, because it's going cold, it's slow, and it's cold and it's going slow is what I'm trying to say. Now, when you're using these preserved lemons, you want to cut the white part out, the pith, and you just want to use the lemon itself. I'm sorry, the peel itself. So I was saying you want to use thin-skinned lemons for this. So you're seeing me cut quite a lot of it out. And these pieces, I'm just going to throw in. I'm getting it down there. I just keep shaving it out. So there's the piece of preserved lemon. It's pretty thin, okay? I'm going to drop that in the mix and shave another one down and drop it in. And this one's pretty much assembled. I'm going to add a little more salt. But you guys see how I'm shaving that just right down on the board. And it's just a peel now, okay? So I'm going to drop that in. I'm going to add a little more salt. By the way, this preserved lemon is pretty darn salty too. Let me get rid of this business. Don't like that. And I'm going to drop in a little salt, a little more salt, and kind of pound things down a little bit. And this is another one we're going to leave overnight. We're going to see how much juice comes out of this. And if I don't have enough juice, I will add a little salty brine in the morning. And so we'll check in the morning on this one. Now, I don't have a disc that'll fit inside here, so I wanted to show you a little life hack for that one. You can get a plastic lid that's foldable and cram it down inside there. And that is the flat surface that you can use to push everything down with. And then sometimes I might just put a jar on top of it, of something, right? Just to keep things submerged. That's the only job you need to do. It doesn't necessarily need to keep it pressed. But we're going to check these guys in the morning. They'll probably need a little bit of brine, okay? But you can see I just put a little plastic lid on there. Otherwise, that's what it looks like. You guys see it? It's beautiful. That was just salt, garlic cloves. I put in preserved lemon on this one, but you don't need that, and jalapenos. That's all it is, okay? And there's our third pickle of the day. We're wrapping them up. We're stacking them up. Welcome, welcome to Quarantine Kitchen Happy Hour. We just did 3 fermentation setups, okay? These are going to be fermenting all week long, and we're going to check in every day on these things with special pickle reports to let you know how these guys are doing, okay? Let's see, the next thing I think I will make is my country wine. Let's make my country wine, and then we're just going to finish it all up with the kimchi. I think I'll just leave that until the end, okay? And so cheers, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I hope you're enjoying. I hope this stuff's keeping you sane. This is just basic cooking technique. It's just a guy talking about food, okay? I ain't a genius, okay? I'm not a scientist. You don't need to be a scientist to do this, okay? It's all pretty basic stuff, especially today. It's just salt and vegetables, quite honestly. I went to the farmer's market. I went to the Oak Park Farmer's Market last Saturday and just engaged one of the vendors out there, and I asked her for like the ripest fruit she had, okay? And so I have got a blend here of peaches, plums, and a bunch of, these are called Tom Cord grapes. They're super sweet. And when I saw these grapes, what I loved about them was they were just covered in that frosty bloom all over. And when I see that bloom, that tells me wild yeast. That's what I'm looking for when I'm making wine. Also, the peaches have that bloom, that fuzz that holds on to yeast as well. The plums have a bloom on them as well. That's all functioning wild yeast. And so I just kind of mashed a little bit just to kind of get funky with it. I wanted to show you the whole fruit, and I'm just going to kind of keep mashing it here. But let me just add a few more things. I just kind of wanted to talk about the fruit. It is like super ripe and ready to make into wine here. I probably have about 4 pounds of it here. Now, what we're going to do is I want to infuse a little bit of flavor into this. You know, I'm making a cordial and after dinner kind of a drink or something like that. I want to save money on wine. And so I'm going to just do a very simple country wine here. I'm not going to do an aged version of it. That's going to be a whole other class, you know, down the road or something. For now, I'm just going to make a very light light in alcohol drinking wine for after dinner. Okay. To do this, I'm going to need usually about 2, 3, 4 pounds of fruit, depending on how you want to make it. Okay. I happen to have about 4 pounds today. Okay. You need some sugar for this. Okay. Typical ratio is for sugar, you need about 3 pounds of sugar to 1 gallon of liquid. Now I'm going to make a 2-gallon batch today, but I've got way more fruit and I've got super ripe fruit here, way more fruit than I would normally need. So I'm going for about 3 pounds of sugar for 2 gallons plus all of this fruit. I'm going to taste it. If I feel like it needs a little more sweetness, I'll add it in there. Okay. But most of the time we're just going by taste on this thing. Okay. But generally speaking, if you have no fruit at all, you can ferment 3 pounds of sugar in 1 gallon of water. And by the way, they don't like me teaching this class at my school at the corrections facility, okay? This is a no-no. Actually, a lot of the tips I have here, I got from my students there. Okay, so as I'm mashing this, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna blend in my sugar. And I thought I might add a few other flavors just to make things interesting, okay? So here goes all my sugar. I'm going to throw in a vanilla bean. I've got some dry ones, and so I'm just going to maybe throw a vanilla bean and a half. And a star anise. Nah, I'm just going to do 1 bean. I don't want to go crazy. I don't want to make peach pie. So I'm going to throw in 1 star anise, little ninja throwing star. And that'll be in there adding a little flavor to the process. Hey, a lot of liqueurs use botanicals and things of this nature, right? And so that's kind of what I'm doing here. Okay, now that I got that sugar in there, this fruit's going to break down really easily. So let me start chugging on that. And I don't really need to get too crazy. In fact, let me show you this. In fact, you know, I could just throw the fruit in there whole and it'll break down, right? The yeast is going to take care of this stuff. But when you add that sugar in there, it really starts breaking down cell walls, just like we were talking about breaking down the cell walls of in a cucumber using salt. Sugar works the same way. Now, as we go, I'm going to collect a few little pits out of there because I don't need them in there, but they certainly aren't going to hurt the process. So as I see pits, I'll start pulling them out. I see several. And you can see it's a lot easier to just kind of smash the fruit and look for pits and, you know, maybe leave one behind. Not a big deal. But this really was pretty effective in smashing it up. Again, that sugar is just macerating in there, breaking down cell walls and helping the juice come out. Okay. There's still a bunch of pits in there, but we're not going to worry about it. There's still a lot of grapes that aren't broken down. The bacteria or the yeast will take care of that. Now, yeast is very different from the bacteria in the crocks. When we're talking about yeast, yeast kind of likes a closed environment to really eat up all the sugar. In the beginning, the yeast can eat up all the sucrose that's readily available. The sucrose was like that sugar I dumped in there, right? Yeast can break that down, no problem. But I also have all the fruit sugars in there, the fructose. It takes them longer to eat that stuff. It takes a kind of a hardy yeast to go ahead and do that, right? And so I will transfer it from this wide crock to a narrow mouth jug. And this is usually where you'll see some kind of a little valve on top of the thing, you know, a little fancy valve, and it'll just allow carbon dioxide to escape out of it. I'm going to do the very same thing. I want to take it out of this in a few days, and I'm just going to put it into a large bottle, a large jug, and instead of a little fancy valve, I usually just put a balloon or a rubber glove or even a condom will work. Just poke a little hole in it, and it creates a positive pressure environment in there, so no bacteria, no yeast can get into, air isn't getting in there, it's just venting gas out of it. Okay, so that's what you're going to see in the beginning days, a wide open crock, but later on we want to kind of narrow that surface area of the yeast that's exposed to air, and we want to let it ferment. Additionally, the yeast in that stage will eat the fructose, and it'll continue cranking out more and more alcohol. You'll get a drier wine, which means less sweet, right? A drier wine with higher alcohol, right? And this is before you even go into a bottle. You can go into bottling after that stage and let it sit and develop character over time, right? And so if you want to age your wine, you're going to want something with a little bit of tannin in it. In this case, I have tannins coming from the grapes and the natural skins of the fruit and things like that. Oftentimes you'll even see like home winemakers add tea or something like that into it just to give it those tannins so it doesn't go bad. It's kind of a preservative, if you will, okay? So now I've got my mash, if you will, okay? I'm gonna get rid of this little bowl. And I've got a crock here that I'm gonna be using, okay? Let me kind of move my mash. Ready the mash. And I got a crock here. And what I like to do, little trick I got from my gals at the offenders at work, is I'm getting a nice clean pillowcase, and I'm just going to pour my mash into that. It's so pretty. Let me grab a little scraper, get the rest of that juice right there. Still a little sugar in there, but that is all going to melt. By the way, you don't need to heat up a water-sugar mixture to melt the sugar. It just speeds it up. I'm very excited about this country wine here. Okay, now that I've got all of that in there, it's just barely venting any liquid out the bottom. And I'm just going to tie a little knot in this sack. I got to get the air out of there. It smells delicious, by the way. It's hard to get my hands down in there because it's so high up. I got it on this cutting board. All right. So there it is. You got your mash in your pillowcase. I got a really, really sweet concoction in there. And at this point, I am going to add some water. So I got 2 gallons of water here. Earlier, I talked about making sure that you don't have chlorine in the water. So I took some water out of the cold water tap. I put it on the stove and I warmed it at about 10 this morning, okay? And it's just been sitting there. It was able to evaporate chlorine off of there, so it's not chlorinated and it won't kill the natural yeast that I took so much time to cultivate in here, right? Remember, I was looking for that fruit that had the bloom on the outside and everything. It just looked like it was coated in yeast. By the way, they sell brewer's yeast and you know, vintner's yeast and things like that. You can buy commercial yeast to do this process for real, but I like to trust the natural yeast, like in my sourdough that I got from next door, right? So let me throw in a little bit of water, no chlorine. And that's my start for my country wine. So very important. I've got like a bubble in my bag here. Let me get it over there. I want to get all the air out of this. Because I want it to submerge. Now we're going to start seeing some activity in this thing probably by tomorrow morning. And we're going to go in here and we're going to stir this every once in a while just to kind of redistribute the yeast. It's all going to kind of settle into one spot. And I want it to kind of redistribute around. And for about a week here, we're going to be kind of checking back on it. And when it tastes pretty good, I might take a little jug of it to consume like that, and then probably continue the process a little longer in a carboy. I need to get one of those narrow-necked bottles for this, okay? And then I will see how high I can get that alcohol and see if I can make a nice dry vanilla peach country wine, okay, with a little star anise in there. Okay. By the way, it is going to be a lot of fun. This is only the second time I've played with this stuff, so I'm kind of looking forward to this. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'll be covering this with just the bowl. I don't have a lid for this, so I'll just use the bowl that I was mixing the fruit in. It sits right on top of this thing. I don't want this open to the air like everything else. I'm not going to completely seal it, but and I want to kind of expose yeast to the air a couple times a day maybe, but this is more of a less oxygen involved in this one than with the other ones. So let me move this out of the way. He's a big dude. Oh God, oh God. So let's revisit our veggies that we salted earlier for this kimchi, okay? So I tossed the radishes and the squash in salt again, a little bit more, and I can see if I tilt the tray again, they've kicked out a little bit more water, okay? As I kind of work with these, I'm actually gonna kind of squeeze them out a little bit too, okay? So those veggies are just kind of chilling, okay? And they're fairly soft, okay? So I'm gonna kind of set them aside again, and we're gonna take a look at the rest of the ingredients. Now with this one, we gotta get on the stove and do a little cooking here, but it won't take long. Okay, so stage one of the kimchi process. I need to make a little porridge here, basically. Most people use just a little rice flour. I'm not gonna say most people, but most Americans, right? We use a little white rice flour and water. I'm gonna do about a cup of water in here, and I've got about an ounce and a half of rice flour. And I'm gonna blend them when they're cold, and then I'm gonna put it on the stove and bring them up. I'm also going to add in a little bit of sugar here, okay? And I have some red pepper that's eventually going in. Now, sugar and salt are great because they'll help me distribute things into, say, a liquid or something, right? And so I'm going to add a little sugar to my flour. That's going to help distribute the flour into my water. And I'm going to add a little sugar into these peppers. And I stir both of those together. And when I try and go into this liquid medium, it's not going to clump up. You guys get that? So blend that sugar in half and half into your ingredients. And this is a Nelson trick, okay? This isn't some from your Korean grandma. That little bit of sugar will help that chili distribute. All right, so I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm actually gonna switch to a wooden spoon, and I'm gonna drop in that cold flour, rice flour, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. This is rice flour. And I was shooting for about a cup of liquid. I might have gone a little over, but I had about a tablespoon or a tablespoon and a half of rice flour, okay? Awesome. Hey, Johnny, thanks. Okay, so I got to kind of hang out on the stove here. I was talking about this last week when we were making soup. I was thickening a soup with flour, you know, a wheat flour. Today I'm using rice flour, okay? And that flour, that starch wants to settle down to the bottom. So I got to kind of keep this moving while it's heating up. I don't have to stir it constantly. I can kind of clean up, but I don't want that flour or starch to settle down in the bottom here, okay? We're just basically cooking this into a porridge like cream of wheat. Delicious cream of wheat. And I'm just going to do little bits of cleanup while we're at it. Oh, yeah. Twang. Oh, yes. Quarantine kitchen, guys. Loving it. Stir in my pot. It won't take long. This isn't a very big container of liquid here. And I can start getting another little thing going here. I got to set up a little food processor here and process some delicious things. So that's what you're looking at there. And I'm doing this while I cook that porridge on the stove. And it's a lot like I said, it's a little bit like cooking cream of wheat here. There we go. Going back to it. Cleaning while I go. There's a little tip for you. Clean while you go. This is where I need the band. Gotta hire again for this show. All right, started settling down. We're getting up there. It's starting to get a little warm. Oh, yes. Mr. Risa. Oh, you're so sweet. Thanks for showing up, by the way. Love having you guys show up. I love seeing the colleagues out there. You guys. What a great crew. Thanks, guys. Oh, yes. Keep stirring it. Come on, baby. Let's go. I saw a bubble. Oh, here we go. Here we go. It's thickening. Pull it off for a second. Maybe smooth it with a whisk here. It almost wanted to clump up on me here. I'm not to the full boil yet. I don't know how thick this will be till I hit that boil. I just wanted to get that whisk just in case. Not long now, guys. This won't take long. We need a full boil. Thumbs up. No. Okay. Come on, baby. So close. It's hitting the boil now. Can we boil it? I'm going to boil it for about 30 seconds to a minute here. Just make sure those starch granules have sucked up their maximum amount of volume. The starch granules can only soak up so much liquid. All right. And one more good boil. One more good round of boiling. It just looks like goo, guys. You don't need to see this. You don't need to see it. All right. So it's still kind of bubbling in there. Maybe not, okay? But this is my, let me throw a towel down. A pot on a cutting board is my big pet peeve. Okay, so this is my porridge that I just made. It looks like a big pot of snot. I'm sorry, guys, but that's what it looks like, okay? I'm going to take my chilies, my chili flakes. Now, these are a Korean chili flake. There's a little heat to these guys, but a little heat, okay? It takes a lot of this chili to make this stuff, okay? I'm going to drop this on in there. I'll give you amounts on the edited version. Blend it on in. And then it's also going to get another layer here. By the way, the sugar I mixed in with that chili, it helps it disperse a little bit. You guys remember me talking about that. So that's in there. It kind of looks like that red stuff in your kimchi, doesn't it? Okay, let me get that all the way in there. And we're going to add some other things here. I want this to cool a little bit, so I'm actually going to set it on my countertop over here. All right. And Roberta, thank you for saying so. Yeah, I got five preparations going, and I messed around with my sourdough before we started. I got a ton of stuff. And I got to say, the best part, my kitchen's trashed, guys. Oh, you can't see it, but it's just like, wow, it's awesome. Awesome. Okay, so back to it, okay? Some other ingredients here. My big favorite Asian flavor profile that I love, 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 ginger, garlic, and scallion, okay? So we'll pull a few things out here. A few ingredients. All right. Yeah, okay. So a base flavor ingredient in a lot of Asian cuisine is ginger, garlic, and scallion. When I'm talking about scallion, I'm not talking about the green part in this section. I'm talking about the white part of the scallion, and I've got a bunch of it right here. That's going to be a big flavor component. I'm going to throw this into a food processor, but it has super, super long fibers in it, so I want to cut those down before it goes in. So give it a rough chop. I hate things on my board when I'm chopping. I'm using a funky knife. This is bugging me. I don't need that serration in there. It's really bothering me. I feel like it's sawing through my board. Okay, so just, you know, nothing fancy here. Just run a knife through it. And that's going to go in my food processor, okay? Hey, I got some chunks of ginger here. I'm going to cut those guys down. I'm going across the fibers. I'm just chunking it up so the food processor can do the rest. That was a good amount of ginger, probably more than I need, but I like ginger. And they say it'll keep you healthy. It'll cure what ails you. The ginger. All right. Okay, so again, I'm just chopping it up so the Cuisinart can do the rest, okay? Food processor, whatever you want to call it. That's going in. And then a goodly amount of garlic. I'm going to throw in, gosh, what's that? 8, 10 heads or 10 cloves? That's about 10 cloves, maybe. I think I'll throw in an 11th one. I've got it all in my food processor bowl. This thing sounds horrible, just warning you. Oh, yeah. So going for the lid. And when you do this, you're going to need a rubber scraper next to you when you do it. That guy right there. So getting my lid on, it's going to be loud. Give it a little scrape. Scrapey scrape, put it on again. A little scrape. You know, once it goes about 2 seconds, everything's stuck to the side, so you got to get in there. And I think we're looking good. That made it a lot faster than just doing it all with a knife, okay? Let me wipe down a little bit. Oh, goodness. Oh, boy. All of this good stuff in my bowl here is going into my porridge, my red porridge that I made, okay? So, again, I hate doing that. I have that on my board. Let me set it right there. And I'm going to load up all of that deliciousness. Ginger, garlic, scallion. Just that aromatic combination. That's a lot of flavor right there. You Again, this is not a traditional kimchi. It is, I guarantee, it's not going to look like your Korean grandma's, okay? This is just like the kind of kimchi I would, you know, kind of throw together in my kitchen back in the day for a restaurant. And now that it's cooled down, I can throw in my fish sauce. Now, I mentioned a fermented fish sauce earlier. Southeast Asian fish sauce, that's what we're talking about. So let me kind of clean up for a sec. Making wine, making kimchi. Okay, so there's no salt in here. The salt in this dish comes from the fish sauce, okay? So I have a little fish sauce in this one. Oh, I hate these lids. I'm gonna just do this. Pop this lid off here. And I'm gonna throw about 3 tablespoons of fish sauce in here. That was about 1 tablespoon. My lid just went flying across the kitchen. I love this. I love show business. I need a stunt man in here. That's what I need. Now, this fish sauce, it can be stinky, okay? Especially when added to hot liquids. And that's why I let this stuff cool down a little bit. But even though I did let it cool down, it's still pretty pungent, if you will. Okay. So that was the kind of American style Thai sauce. Now this squid brand, I don't know about you guys, but if I get a fish sauce, I like squid brand. I don't buy a fish sauce if it don't have a squid on the label. I'm glad the other stuff's gone. I'm gonna bust out the real deal here, and we're gonna give it a little bit of love here. So I want about 3 tablespoons of this fish sauce. This is the salt in the fermentation. Every fermentation we had salt, except for the wine. If you need a good amount of this stuff, it takes a while to get. So again, it started out with water and rice flour. And then I added a little sugar as well. And I cooked that together. And then I added a Korean chili flake or chili powder. I got flakes today. And then I blended up ginger, garlic, and scallion. Added that in there, and then I added some fish sauce to it, okay? Now, I should say that many of these kimchi preparations will have fish in them, in addition to the fermented fish sauce. I actually purchased some. I usually use these little dried shrimps in my experience. I think, you know, just reading the label about how it might contain lead and stuff, I think I'm just gonna leave these guys out and just do a gringo style kimchi here today. I hope that's okay with everybody. But yeah, I was looking at that and my wife's like, nah, I ain't eating that, you know, and that kind of thing. I'm like, I think I'll leave it out so she can try these a little bit and explore them, okay? So we're leaving that out. So we're gonna just say, when I do this in Big Edit, we're gonna say optional when it comes to that stuff, okay? All right, let's see. Didn't you add salt and sugar to the Korean chilies? Let's see, I added only sugar to those Korean chilies. I could have added salt in there, but yeah, I usually just use the fish sauce in this. Is our only form of salt, Roberta. Thanks for asking. Yes. Let's see, Danny's out there. Thanks for stopping by, young lady. All right, we're gonna start packing our jar for this kimchi. So I've got a big old jar, okay? I'm not gonna be using the lid. We want these fermentations to be exposed to air, so we won't be engaging the lid. Once this is done and I get the okra out of there, the soft vegetables, I'm also gonna have radish greens in it. Once that's done, I'm actually going to seal this with the lid. I'll put the lid on it and have the other vegetables, the radishes and squash, ferment for a while in my refrigerator in there. So it'll be a process. As I eat these, by the way, the early bacteria that gets in here in those early days is a certain type of bacteria, and then you get a different type of bacteria as you get more fermentation going. The acid increases and only certain bacteria can live there, and as the acid increases more, only certain bacteria can get there. So if you're eating this kimchi at different times, you'll get different bacteria in your gut as you kind of go through the process, right? So I actually have 4 vegetables here, okay? What it's gonna look like is I've got my bowl here that I needed to toss all my vegetables in. I was using this this same bowl to toss my vegetables in earlier. And back then, I should say I was using salt in the beginning with these vegetables. I did have salt in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the squash that I'm going to put on the bottom, the firmest veggie. I'm going to put that in my bowl. And I'm going to add some green onion to it. Let me move things. I got to figure out my flow here, guys. Here we go. Here's my flow. All right. So I've got my porridge, I've got my squash, and then I've got my jar over here that I'm going to be filling. Okay. As I do this squash, I'm going to add a few little green onions in there. Okay. Now I'm using the green part of my green onions. And so I'm just going to kind of break those up, toss them in with my squash. That was a piece that was a little long. And I'm going to add a little porridge. I'm going to mix them up. Kind of looks like kimchi, doesn't it? And I'm going to just start feeding them into my jar, okay? It's going to get a little messy. So again, by the way, winter squash is my favorite kimchi ever. It is so delicious, the texture of it. Big chunks of squash make excellent pickles, super firm, really good. Let's see, next vegetable. It's going to be a little messy. I'm going with radishes next. I have pre-wilted these vegetables in salt. So there was additional salt in the mix, regular old salt. A lot of that salt got kicked out with the water though. Okay, a few more. My hands are a mess, right? But a few more of those green onions going in there. By the way, these radishes, I left little nubs of the green tops on them, right? It's all good. Those tops are going to ferment. In fact, you're going to see me using radish greens in just 1 second. So I'm doing the same thing. A few little green onions there, some of the porridge, and I pack it on in. Oh, radish down. And next, I've got my okra pods. Got a little water in there that time. Now these pods, you don't want to really agitate them. I salted them 1 time earlier. You don't want to smash these guys or anything. They'll start kicking out all their goo, okay? And so we don't want that. For this, I'm going to add a few more of my little green tops. And some of the porridge. I'll pack them on in. This okra won't take long to ferment. And then finally, one more thing. I'm going to ferment these radish greens as an experiment, and I'm going to put them on the top of this. There's a few more of those green onion pieces in there, and these radish greens are super pungent, and they're going to ferment in probably about 2, maybe 3 days, maybe. And that's viable kimchi right there. I'm going to add a little more porridge, and I think I'm done with porridge. That's probably enough. Get rid of that. And let me kind of run these around. And that's what that looks like. Okay, it ain't pretty, but it's going to be good. And it's got to be good for you. This is funky stuff. Talk about utilizing product, right? Using those radish greens in there. The radish greens and the okra are going to be done in just a couple of days. This is an experiment on top here. I haven't done the greens before, but hey, You can do greens, you can do kale, fermented kale and things like that. Okay. So let me pull it on over. You can see squash in the bottom, followed by radishes. On top of that, you've got some okra pods. I can't really see one right now. And then radish greens on top of that, okay? I'm gonna get my foldable lid here, put it on down, and just start pressing it down. And that's gonna be my kimchi. Now this one's pretty wet. We are going to cover all of these with a little bit of cheesecloth, okay? If you have coffee filters, those work as well. The cheesecloth will allow more yeast and bacteria to visit your experiments. And like I say, this lid will not be engaged. We want this open to air a little bit, just kind of a light seal. This is gonna go for a few days with those softer vegetables. I'm gonna harvest those out of there. You'll see that in a few days. And then I'll be sealing the jar and fermenting slow in my refrigerator for this guy. All right, so there it is. We are gonna see some lactic bacteria create some acidity in this little pot here. And there's gonna be some very, very unique fermentation flavors going on with it. It's unlike anything you have ever had. I'll have the cheesecloth in the morning for you guys, okay? I think I'll leave it alone with that, but let me kind of line things up here and we'll talk about what we did. So really the first pickle that we looked at was the kraut. This has a little bit of horseradish, caraway, and salt in it. That's all I did with this cabbage. I chopped it up, I mashed it as I worked the salt into it. I put a little top on it and I'm kind of pressing on it and oh my gosh, there it is. Can you guys see that? Let me tilt this a little bit. Can you guys see that? There is already water coming out of that sauerkraut, okay? So we're pretty much submerged. That's what I'm looking for. You want all that liquid down in there. In the morning, we're gonna check this one again. And if it needs more water to completely cover the vegetables, we're gonna add a little bit more water. If you don't have the vegetables submerged, by the way, you can see I have a little weight on top of the veggies. We want them submerged in liquid, and if they're not submerged in liquid, that part that's sticking out is gonna turn rotten, okay? And many people will be fermenting their vegetables. They'll see that and they'll be like, oh my gosh, it went bad. It smells bad. Hey, little secret, sauerkraut's supposed to smell bad, okay? So the thing is if you just fish that nasty stuff off the top of there, the sauerkraut underneath is beautiful stuff. You could have mold growing on top. You can even have maggots crawling in the top, but I guarantee the maggots aren't down in the acid down in the bottom, right? All the stuff underneath is safe from harm. All of that stuff is a preservation method that they've been using for hundreds and hundreds of, probably 1,000 years, maybe since the invention of salt, okay? Rome was built because there was a salt spring there, right? It was a seat of world power because of preservation, right? They were able to do it there, okay? So that was the sauerkraut. Let's take a look at the next one, the quick pickle. Or not a quick pickle, I'm sorry, that's next week is quick pickles. But this is our brined pickle, I should have said, okay? My cucumbers are down and definitely down in the water now. Let me get this lid off. Oh, buddy, come on. You won't come off. There we go. So they're definitely down in liquid now. They've got a smell that can't be beat, okay? There's no acidity to this at all yet because it hasn't been developed yet. The little bacteria need to get in there and do their thing. So we're gonna weight that guy down and keep everything below the level of liquid. That liquid's still a little bit warm. And by the way, if that liquid's too hot, you'll kill all the little yeasties in there. Next, we had our jalapenos, okay? Now, I don't see much development on this here. I might just add a little bit of salty brine to this. I don't see much liquid coming out at all. Well, there's a little bit. We'll see it in the morning. We'll try it in the morning. There's a little bit rolling around. We have the kimchi. I just kind of showed you that. And I'm going to put a little weight on there to kind of press that down more effectively. I think I'll put a second plastic lid, maybe a third one even. Those deli cup lids are great. Sorry, I'm over here. Let's look at this. Yeah, I think I'll just, stick another deli lid in there to hold it down a little more effectively. And then I'll just put a jar or something like that on top of it just to keep things submerged. We want it to be juicy. All right, and that was the fermentation with bacteria. And then over in the corner, you can see my big old crock, but you can kind of see the bag is completely submerged in there. And we are just going to keep a lid on top of this guy. I'm just going to use this bowl, okay, just to keep, you know, most of the air out of there. And you'll still be able to see, you know, fermentation going on in there. Once or twice a day, probably twice a day. It's a little bit warm. I'm going to get in there and stir this around and just redistribute the yeast in there so it can keep being exposed to all that good sugar in there and everything. I'll keep things moving. By the way, when this is done, that I've got that pillowcase full of mash in there. That pillowcase, all of that mash is going to be good for maybe starting a new batch of this and making a vinegar out of it. But just leaving it in the crock, re-wetting it, and leaving it exposed to air will let the bacteria in, and those bacteria will create acidity, okay, just like vinegar. And this will be a peachy vinegar. So maybe we'll try that as an experiment, okay? Today was all about fermentation, guys. We went through 5 different recipes of fermentation, if you want to even call them recipes. I was really just throwing stuff in jugs with salt most of the day, right? We did a brine style. We did 2 dry salt style. We did a kimchi, kind of a porridgey type style. And then we did a country wine using yeast to ferment the sugars out of fruit. It's going to be beautiful stuff. I got a question here from Mike. Are those half or full sour pickles? Gosh, fella, we'll see how sour they get once they're done. I am not making it by any sort of standard recipe or anything. Again, just throwing handfuls of salt in here, and I'm going to let them go until they're as sour as I want, because I could stop them early where they're just a little bit sour, and I can let them keep going. These are slices, so I might just go a little bit sour on them. I don't think I'll let them keep going because they will keep getting softer as they go. This food preservation is good stuff for days of quarantine, and it's really good stuff for days of summer when our farmers markets are just packed full of produce. I mean, we can just take advantage of all of this stuff. We can do canning, we can do preservation, we can do fermentation, we can do drying, right? Preserve all of this food for the long haul, and maybe kind of survive, you know, maybe all of this, you know, and survive eating really, really well. That's what it's mostly all about, right? So I think that's going to be it for me, everybody. Thanks so much for coming in. Oh, by the way, I should mention this Thursday, Ms. Amber Stott is going to be on Between Two Stoves. That'll be a great one. Next week, as I said, Ms. Carissa Jones on Quarantine Kitchen Happy Hour. And then next week on Between Two Stoves, we're looking at Eric V. Miller from V.MillerMeats. I had him on the show before. Technical difficulties, it didn't go well, and so I'm going to give him another shot, and we're gonna do a show that's going to work this time, okay? And so thanks guys for showing up. Thanks for joining. I hope you guys picked up a little something on this day. I hope a couple of you guys have never really even explored this fermentation stuff, that it's all kind of new to you. If you are new to this stuff, Sandor Katz is your man, okay? Check him out. That is the guy that I pretty much follow. It's like, you'll see what I mean. You look in this book, it ain't about recipes, guys. It's just, he talks about technique, which is what I love. I don't really like getting bogged down in recipes, but I will have that stuff up on the internet for you, okay? Thanks, everybody. I love doing this, and I hope you guys too. Don't forget that the party is always in the kitchen, okay? We'll call it a day. Take care, and we'll see you on Thursday. Oh,